It's always the same.
45 years of hurt in the Challenge Cup. 40 years of hurt as a team. OKR have won the Challenge Cup in 2025.
We beat the Wire in Wembley rain. Tom Davies try helped ease the pain. We topped the league. We would not fall. The mighty Robins above them all. An Old Trafford clash with Wigan's might. We burned the sky with red that night. 24-6, the game was done. History made.
Oh, it's an interceptor, and it's the boy from Wigan that will win it from Hawkins to Rovers. And Superman guy from Joe Burgess. A Superman performance from Hawkins to Rovers. They win the treble. They win a grand final.
Red and white, we do believe a grand final win to complete the three. The greatest year in Rovers history. Celebrate the
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Robin Pod Weekly, which is of course brought to you by Budget Tyres Auto Centre, the only car specialist trusted by the players, club officials and supporters of Hull Kingston Rovers. On this week's episode, we'll look back at a disappointing defeat at the hands of the Catalans Dragons. We'll preview the Robins' first home Super League game of 2026. We'll answer the big question, answer all your questions during question time. And Steve Till once again joins us for Robins Revisited. Graham, welcome back to the Robin Pod. Let's kick off with the Catalan game because there's plenty to talk about on the back of that 26 points to 20 defeat. Confidence was high, I think, going into that. I spoke on the Robin Pod. I was thoroughly confident of a Robins victory. It didn't quite pan out like that, though, did it, Graham?
No, afternoon, John. Afternoon, everybody. Like you, I was full of confidence, optimism that we'd shook off the early season hangover to start putting a good run of performances together. The noises coming out of the camp were good in terms of good training week. Travelled over early to get prep done over there. So everything was geared up towards it. Unfortunately, I think the performance didn't match up to that hype and expectation that we all had.
Yeah, we're at a bit of a funny stage, aren't we? Because obviously after the defeat to Leeds in Las Vegas, then coming back and beating Huddersfield in the Challenge Cup, and then beating them, in the Super League, and then beating them in the Challenge Cup, we thought we'd maybe weathered the storm a little bit and got rid of some of that early season rustiness that we'd seen. But there's a lot to like in that Catalans victory, but there's also a lot to not like as well. Like you said, the preparation was good. The boys got the chance to have a bit of a break whilst also then getting match ready in the lead up to the game. We saw James Batchel coming back into the side. Everything was pointing towards, 2 points really when you look at how Catalan had been this season, patchy at best. But it just never really materialised, is it? Although we did get off to a great opening, didn't we? That opening 10 minutes, we saw Tyrone May go in. And to be fair, once, we'd kicked off and we'd got through them first few minutes, I thought the boys were looking good and looking sharp. Yeah,
I agree, John. I thought the first 10, 12 minutes or so, captured the Tyrone May try to give us a bit of advantage on the scoreboard. I thought we were looking quite controlled. And then Catalan, I think, over the last few weeks, like you said, patchy, I think was your word there, but they've shown signs. They've got some improvement going on last season as well. And I think what it showed to me in terms of the game as a whole against Catalans was that if we haven't realised it already, we've now got a target on our back. I thought Catalans played well and overall deserved the result on the balance of play. But we've got a target on our back where everybody's raising the game. We saw, everybody knows what happened in Vegas where Leeds were outstanding and we weren't. We got caught out against York, them being up for it. We got caught out against Catalans being on the up and us being slightly off in some areas. So I think if we as fans haven't realised it yet, there's an whether it's conscious or subconscious, I think there's a reality that teams will raise their game against us given what we did last season. And we have to learn how to deal with that. We have to work extra hard and try and get that control in games and capitalise on it when it's our time. But what I've also noticed this season as well is that it's almost a different game to last season that we're watching. Argue about the rule changes as much as we want in that, but that's the same for everybody. But I'm not quite sure we've adapted yet, both with the ball and without the ball, to those rule changes to make us as efficient and effective as we were last season under the old rules.
Yeah, there's no doubt whatsoever that we are still looking a little bit clunky, aren't we? Particularly in attack, but then again, some of the individual defensive efforts are not quite at the level that we've become accustomed to, and certainly at the level the players will be happy with. Is it a collective thing, or do you think it's individuals, Graham, at the moment?
Yeah, I think there's probably a bit of both on Saturday, John, whereby there was a few individual errors that we aren't used to seeing. Simple ones like drop balls, misplaced passes. They're I won't say unforgivable, but they're ones that you can control with a bit more composure. So again, I think we just need to get into that habit of doing the right things, basic things, more often than not. So, but then again, you look at defensively, and the coaches will talk about systems and groups of players working collectively. I thought there were quite a few occasions where we got some easy meters against us on Saturday, and whether that's again to do with the new rules and the speed of the rucks and the play of the balls, whether that's because of that or whether it's the systems not functioning, the left hand side or the right hand side or the middles connected enough to stop that. I thought clunk is probably the right word, Jono, in terms of both attack and defence at the minute.
Yeah, and when you look at some of the tries that we are conceding, what concerns me probably the most, Graham, and we saw that evidence in the first half against Catalan, is the ease that sides are making meters down the middle. We don't seem to be able to front up, and whether that's because of the ruck speed, and we'll mention that, I know you've already mentioned it, whether it's the ruck speed, because we look like we're reeling a lot. We don't look like we're able to get back in time, which of course the opposition are taking advantage of. These 6 agains, they seem to be hurting every side. They seem to be hurting us just that little bit more at the moment. And for a side that's famed on its pre-season and its intensity and its ability to prepare the players for, quick games, hard games, we just seem to be reeling a little bit, and teams are taking full advantage of that. And I've mentioned it a few times on the Robin Pod now, where I don't think our pack looks necessarily the biggest. I know I mentioned last week when I saw the boys, really close at Huddersfield, but we came up against a big Catalan pack, and it was them who were on the front foot for much of that first half. And that's how they got the field territory. That's how they got a good number of points on the board. And at the moment, I don't know what the answer to that is at the moment, because is it a case of we're just losing the ruck, or we're creating problems for ourselves by conceding 6 agains at key points of the game or in key areas?
Yeah, probably yes and yes to both of those points. I think the frustration as a fan for me personally is that there were so many games last season where we exerted control from a defensive perspective. We were able to pin teams in. Now I'm not saying we were slowing down the ruck enough. We've seen other teams do it intentionally and brilliantly, by the way, within the rules. I don't think we've got to that point with the new laws of the game whereby we're able to control that as much as we did last season, which again has caused us a knock-on effect of how do we deal with that quicker speed. It's giving people less time to get defensively set and get organised. It looks chaotic a lot of the time in terms of the game itself, not just our defence or our attack. The game itself just looks chaotic, and everybody trying to operate at 100 miles an hour. And last season we weren't doing that because we had the control over the game. We were able to control teams defensively, pin them in, and capitalise on those kicks that were coming from 20 metres out from their own line, 30 metres out, because we'd done so much great work defensively. I don't think there's been too many sets this season where we've had that sort of control without getting pinged for a 6 again, and therefore letting people out easily enough to do that. So again, I go back to that point near the beginning about that. Have we adapted to the new rules and regs enough to earn those controls within games? And I know it's the same for all teams, so I'm not bemoaning just us getting pinged. but we seem to be coming on the wrong side of the count through our own doing and the referee's interpretations of it, of giving away too many of those 6 agains, which again just invites more pressure. And whether it's Catalans or Wigan, you don't need to invite too many teams with ball in hand too often for them to cause you damage.
Yeah, and what you can't deny as well in that first half is how on top that left edge for Catalan was. You know, we saw the teenager Mark out there, then we saw Fartipi and Likovic and them three, you know, whether it was down to slow defensive reads or not, but them three seemed to really cause us problems. And of course, we saw right at the end of the game, didn't we, with Mark going in for that winning try. But particularly in that first half, we didn't seem to be able to get a run on where, you know, in how to stop them really, because we saw the offloads, you know, we saw the direct running from all three of them, and we saw obviously Mark with a bit of skill, and that defensive effort on that edge, you know, it is causing problems. Burgess came up with 4 errors again during the game. You know, you look at the missed tackles, and it is becoming a bit of a feature, that left edge, where teams seem to be able to break us down just that little bit easier over there. And at the moment, I don't know whether it's we need to jam up or we need to, you know, because we're being put all over the field at the moment, you know, we're being dragged into places we probably don't want to go. But it is a concern and it does need tightening up. And to be fair, even last season, Graham, when we was as successful as we was, there was still times when our edge defence wasn't perfect, particularly that left-hand side.
No, and I guess what, you know, when there's quick play and it got exposed, I guess, as well as it's probably an extreme scenario, but that second half against Brisbane, it got exposed quite a lot on that edge when Reece Walsh stepped into the line and Staggs, etc., were just running through it seemed at will. So I think there is some sort of issue there. But again, it's how do these new rules impact on your spacings, for example, your communication, your connections. We're talking about an established group of players in Burgess, Gildart, Batchelor, etc. within that setup. So we're not talking as if it's new combos either. So I wonder if it's something structurally defensively that we haven't got quite right under the new rules and regs. Well, like you say, whether we need to jam up or step in half a space to close gaps down a little bit. But then all that does is give space on the outside of shoulders. So yeah, it's a conundrum that I'm sure the coaches are aware of and working towards fixing. But for us as fans watching it, it's certainly a worry when we prided ourselves on defensive efforts and, you know, the number of 0 points against we got last season, and certainly under 10 points conceded. There aren't going to be many games now this season where any team, let alone us, where any team hits a 0 against them on the scoreboard. I just don't think the new rules and regs will promote that. So again, going back to that adaptation of we have to adapt what worked successfully last year, we have to try and turn that into something that's going to be working successfully this year. And I don't think at the minute on either side of the ball we've got that quite right.
No, and the try that'll probably disappoint the Robins most was after that Chris Satire break, wasn't it? Right down the middle, seemed to knock us over, you know, skittle us over. And then we saw some poor defence from Hiku, and it was it ended up being a walking try when really from where they started that attack, Catalans, you know, we had plenty of opportunity to stop them. Don't get me wrong, it must be tremendously difficult to stop a defender, an attacker like Chris Satire when he's running at your full belt. That said, we still had the opportunity once he was tackled to clean that up. We didn't. They went in, and then obviously at half time, people are wondering whether we're going to have nothing in the tank to come back from that. But that was just an example, wasn't it, of where our defensive efforts just haven't been quite right so far.
Yeah, and again, you know, it was a fantastic run that he did, but last season we didn't see too many times us being undone like that, straight down the middle with big bodies getting pushed out of the way as easy as that. But I appreciate when he's at full speed, he's a huge human being to try and stop. And you know, when Broadbent's trying to stop him, I think it's an unfair fight on a one-on-one basis. So, but once he's gone down, we've still got the opportunity then to reset, get our structure right for the next play of the ball, which, you know, we didn't get right. And, you know, looking at the playback on it, you would expect that Hiku wouldn't be happy with his defensive effort, but even before it got to that position, could we have done a bit more to prevent that from happening? I'm sure they'll be looking at that and looking at ways of fixing that. But yeah, it's it's something that is a concern because, as I say, we prided ourselves on that defensive effort last year, and I don't think in any of the games that we've seen we've been completely dominant in defence like we were last season.
No, definitely not. And if you look at the the second half momentum, the half shifting it, and the Robins, to their great credit, put themselves in a place where actually we all probably thought they was going to go on and win. It was a great comeback, wasn't it? And that's where we saw Rovers attacking flair at its best. We saw Mikey Lewis being able to get a bit hold of the game a bit more. We seemed to be attacking on the front foot, which gave us that opportunity to create the field position. And just like against Huddersfield in the Challenge Cup, when we attacked with pace, we was a match for anyone. And Joe Burgess' try was just another example of that.
Yeah, 100%. We looked good in that second half. We obviously had I'm sure there was a few home truths about the first half performance and where it had not gone as well. And it seemed to be a different level of performance once we'd weathered that first 10, 15 minutes of that second half as well. There's some good defensive efforts in there to keep them out. And let's not forget as well, there were interchanges down as well with injuries, HIAs as well. So I thought once we'd got ourselves back into that game, certainly at 20-all, there was only ever going to be one team win it, in my opinion. And then, it got to that breakaway with 5 minutes to go, whatever it was. And Brody made that poor decision, in my opinion, to try and offload on tackle one that ultimately led to a turnover in possession, which they marched down the other end. And instead of us going for potential 1 point as a minimum outcome from that set, we ended up conceding 6. So, and ultimately the game was gone after that. So, yeah, I thought it was a much better second half attacking performance. I thought as the game went on and the fatigue got into their legs. But again, credit where it's due to Catalan. They fought and scrapped, and given the reduction in bodies that they had available to them, they put in some big defensive efforts to stop us as best they could. And then ultimately had enough gas in the tank to be able to capitalise on our error with a few minutes to go and go on and win the game.
Yeah, and I'm sure I was one of thousands who will have been watching that TV screaming at Broadbent when he popped that ball up. When we had the field position, the point where it was in a tackle count, the energy we had, I thought we could have run it through them, but we'd made that much space, and look, ultimately it wasn't the reason we lost the game, but also you could point to and go, that's maybe one of the reasons we didn't win it, because we put ourselves in such a great position. But also, at the end of the day, if it comes off, and it's a great play, and everyone's rejoicing at the same point. We're probably doing some things that are a bit un-Rovers like, aren't we? And Willie Peters goes on about and says, a Hull KR performance, what that looks like, and doing things like that, uncharacteristic mistakes, isn't a Hull KR performance. So, there's no doubt that, like we said, they did well to fight back. They did well to get back into the game. Like we said, they did well to get back into the game to the point where most people genuinely thought they was going to win it, but we couldn't ice it, could we? And on the back of that error from Broadbent, they pretty much go up the other end and they come away with the spoils. The edge defence again, questionable. And then everyone's, as high as we was in that second half, thinking we're going to win, the balloon bursts, isn't it? And it's another defeat for the Robins.
Yeah, I think, John, as well, that it's all ifs, buts and coconuts now, but you look back to game 1 against York and the decisions we made, Mikey making that trip going down to 10, ultimately losing by a point. You look at the Broadbent decision with 4 or 5 minutes to go. It done the hard work in creating the break and getting 50 metres upfield. We were probably just inside their half on tackle one with a full set basically to go at a line that was retreating. Like I said, I think we would have had at least at the worst a 1 point drop goal attempt on that one. Last season we were coming out on the right end of those results, whereby Cass game 1 we got the drop goal to win it. Wakey away, we came away with a sneaky win there. So again, it's fine margins because we're talking about if, and appreciate, as I say, it's if and it's all water under the bridge now, but if we'd have been composed enough to close out the game against York, if we'd have taken the right composed decision to take a tackle on tackle one with Broadbent and see that game out and get the win there, all of a sudden we're painting a different picture on the start of the season and the league position, because we haven't shown those composure, those moments of composure. it's a completely different scenario, and we're now looking at one win out of the first 4 games as it is.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about obviously the impact on this early season craziness in terms of Vegas and Brisbane in question time, because I know there's some people commenting about that. That said, take away all of that, we have still had the opportunity to win the game. We had opportunities against York. So, like you've just said there, Graham, if you look back to this point last season, we weren't playing great, but we got ourselves on the right side of the result. This season, it's not quite panning out for us. But we're still not a million miles away. And that's what I meant when I said at the start about, there was lots of things that not to like during the Catalan game, but there was a lot of stuff to like as well. And I don't think we're that far away from, getting another 2 points. And of course, we've got Saints up next, which is going to be a really interesting encounter. But again, when you reflect on that Catalan game, it feels like one that got away rather than one that Catalan really deserved to win. Time will tell, wasn't it? And to be fair to Catalans, Graham, they seem to have got their act together. They had some exciting young players out there, didn't they? Who had the energy, had the vigour, and there was backed up by a big, powerful, experienced pack. Di Costa, I mean, he was fantastic at hooker for me. I thought he had a great game. So there'll be no mugs there. I think they're getting their act together.
Yeah, 100%, John. I think, you don't go over to the Catalans and expect anything less than a big, ugly, aggressive pack to play against. That's just how they've built their teams over the last decade or so. So I think we should have expected that anyway, and that's just par for the course. But agree, season on season, what they have got now is a much better squad than they had performing last year. So, Tompkins has got in there. Some new players have gone in there. As we know, Mickey Mack's involved in that setup now as well. So some new ideas coming forward for them. So that I think they're going to be a much better team than they were last year, and they'll be competitive, certainly at home as they usually are. It's always a tough place to go. But like you, I think there was a 2 points for us to take away there, and it feels like 2 points got away, albeit that overall I think Catalans deserved on their performance to take the 2 points on the evening.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, right. We'll talk about how the Robins can rectify some of the issues that they've faced against Catalan and over the last few weeks very shortly. But before we do that, Steve Till joins us for Robins Revisited.
Hi, Chris, and obviously St Helens at home this week, first game of the season at Craven Park, and I'm going to go back to 2008 when a similar thing happened. St Helens were the visitors for our first game at home in the second season that we were in Super League, and it was a strong St Helens team. The halfbacks were Sean Long and Leon Price. Paul Wellens was fullback, and the front row was pretty strong. Roby, Cunningham came on later. Cunningham was on the bench as okay, but the two props were Fozzard, who was later to become a Rovers player, and James Graham. And we all know how good James Graham was. Went over to Australia and played for the Bulldogs and played many a game for England and Great Britain. So anyway, the scene was set. Ben Thaler was the referee, and there were just over 8,000 in Craven Park for what turned out to be a real thriller. Rovers didn't make a mistake for the first 22 minutes, and in fact it was in those 22 minutes they didn't concede an error or concede a penalty until that 22nd minute, but by that time they led 12-0 with tries by Jake Webster and Daniel Fitzhenry, and it was soon 16-0 as Chev Walker laid on a try for second row forward Clint Newton. 16-0 became 16-6 when Cunningham forced his way over from close range, but Rovers had a healthy half-time lead, which they increased just after half-time to 22 points to 6 when Scott Morrell put Sean Briscoe over. So 22-6, and it looked all over for Rovers. But the next 14 minutes, St Helens pulled level. So 3 tries in 14 minutes So the sides locked at 22 each. And then in the 72nd minute, Rovers edged ahead when Jake Webster kicked a penalty. So the scoreline was Rovers 24, St Helens 22. And then came a real controversial moment. Seconds to play, really, maybe 2 minutes to play. And St Helens got a penalty, which Sean Tyrer attempted and missed. It would have put Saints level. However, it meant Rovers had to kick off from their own 25 drop kick to give Saints possession. And Saints used that possession. And in fact, one of the Saints players, I think it was Tyra, actually made a 50-yard run, took a ball and made a 50-yard run to touchdown, only for the referee to be called back by the touch judge, who would remain on the halfway spot, and he spotted an infringement. And what it was, the ball carrying arm of the person who fed Tyra had touched the ground. So it became a penalty to Rovers. Rovers kicked for touch, tapped the ball, and the siren sounded, and Rovers kicked the ball out and had eventually won by 24-22. But it was a really controversial finish with arguments on both sides as to whether the referee should have allowed the try. But had it been today, of course, with the bunker with the replays, it would have been obvious that the passer of the ball, the St Helens passer of the ball, his ball carrying arm had touched the ground before he made the pass, and it would have been there'd been no argument about it. Anyway, Rovers won 24-22, thrilling match. Let's hope we can have the same again this weekend.
Right, Graham. So it's St Helens up on Friday night. It's the first home Super League game of 2026. I'm sure lots and lots of people watching and listening to this will be looking forward to getting back home, won't they, to see the Robins running out in front of that East Stand. St Helens, after a disappointing defeat on the opening day round of the season against Warrington, have recovered to then win the next next 4 games. What are you expecting from St Helens, Graham? Because they look in a little bit of a better shape than potentially we do at the moment, and maybe a bit better shape than they were last season. So it's a different animal we're facing on Friday night.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, John, it'd be fantastic to get back to Craven Park for the first time. Welcome the team back for the first time as world champions, World Club champions. So that'll be a spectacle. It's always good Friday night under the lights for me at Craven Park. So hopefully there's a fantastic noise, a fantastic atmosphere that we can use to urge the boys on. I think it'll be a tough challenge first and foremost from St Helens, as we've touched on. We're not firing on all cylinders at the minute. They've shown improvements definitely on last season. They've got a few injuries that they've had recently that have, to some key personnel, but they're still knocking out results. So I think they'll come across confident. Hastings is pulling the strings in there. Sailor seems to be playing well alongside him as well. So I think we're in for a tough challenge. But if there's any game that we need to get behind the boys and for them to put in a performance, I think it's Friday night. It's all set up for a very, very good game between what I think still will be 2 teams that are competing for at the top end of the table come playoff time. So I don't doubt that. But I think for us, it carries a little bit more weight of pressure to put in the performance, first of all, that is a Hull KR performance that then hopefully turns into a result, because we do need to start seeing the results come fairly soon to allow us to not lose too much ground over the Wigans, Warringtons of this world, who are comfortably ahead. Appreciate we've got that fixture in hand, but I'd rather have the points on the board.
Yeah, and just before we go into more detail about the game, Graham, what have you made about this new ruck speed, these 6 agains that keep getting thrown around by the referee, and the perceived lack of inconsistency between the match officials, and even not even between the match officials within a game as well, because these early rounds, it does seem to be playing a bit of a part, and as much as it was brought in to make the spectacle faster and more entertaining, I think there's some supporters, or a good number of supporters, who are actually not liking it really, because it's just that we're in the unknown sometimes about why something's been given or why it hasn't.
Yeah, I'm exactly in that camp as well, Jano, in that I'm still adapting to the rule change. Mentioned earlier on, I think at some stages games seem chaotic, and there doesn't seem to be an element of control in it. And I'm not saying we need to go back and slow everything right down again, but I just wonder if we've gone too far the other way to speed it up. And look, by all accounts, players like it that way. The players want it fast. But as a fan, like you suggested there are inconsistencies between week on week, depending on the referee you get, even in game, as to what's given in one half for one team and not the next one. And there isn't that level of explanation there. We can't hear what the ref's saying live in the ground, as sometimes you can pick up on TV to do it. But sometimes there does seem to be an unnecessary amount of whistle and 6 agains that creep into it, whereby it's going to take that time to adapt. From a player's perspective, appreciate they've had all off season to get used to it and play with it, ready for this season. So I don't know. I'm yet to be convinced it's the right outcome to help the game and promote it as a better spectacle. I'll wait and see what the next few weeks bring, to see if it settles down, to see if there's as usual with these new rules that come in, there's usually a period of time, and then there's a bit of a reflection with the clubs to see how it's working, and sometimes there's a little bit of leniency shown regarding some of those regulations that have been brought in historically. So it'll be interesting to see if they go down that route. But look, everybody should be playing to the same rules and regs, and if the inconsistency there with referees, that's up to the RFL to step into. I'm sure there's a process that clubs can go through to voice their feedback on this rule change. But yeah, I'm in agreement with some fans that when it works for you, it's great and you get the extra ball in hand. But when it goes against you, it's frustrating as anything when you don't understand why it's happened.
Yeah, and to be fair, when it was first brought in, it was in response to the slow plays of the balls, wasn't it? Because of defenders laying on, slowing the game right down. Yeah. So in that respect, everyone was happy when the 6 again came in, because it stopped teams being able to do that. But now it seems like we've gone even further, and it's almost we've gone that into hyperspeed in terms of defenders now. Even if they, put a hand on them for longer than a second, getting pinged for it. Yet then within the same set or the next set from the opposition, you could see someone being given a bit more of a license to lay on the attackers. And then that's where the frustration's coming from, is literally, and the challenge with that is, because it's the referee's interpretation at that time, naturally, as humans, you're not going to get the consistency over the course of 80 minutes, because we are only human, the referees are only human. And I think that's where sometimes when you start leaving it to people's interpretations, that's where it can go wrong, because then you lose the consistency. And I think that's what we're seeing in the stands and people watching on TV, just not knowing. And I don't know how you get it back now, because I don't know whether the match officials are being instructed to do a count in the head, for example, or a 1 or 2 or 3 second count, or whether it's literally just what they see in front of them. And I suppose that's where we maybe need to go back. Like, I don't think people necessarily mind seeing a slower ruck, but obviously not to the point where it used to be. But at the same time, defence needs to be rewarded as well. It's not all about attack either.
No, and you look at all the successful teams in the past, we've had it a lot through the Wigan era, and certainly for us over the last couple of seasons, our success has been built on defensive solidity. And this new, way of operating doesn't promote that. It doesn't reward that solid defence. And look, we don't want to get to the stage where we've got 4 men in a tackle and they're peeling off one by one and the ruck speed's really slow. But like you suggested there, John, I think we're going into hyperspeed with it now. And if you're a fraction of a second with look, some players are bending these interpretations a little bit by trapping players in, and sometimes you get them go for you. And, so there's a whole host of kidology going on to try and encourage the referee to give those 6 agains on some occasions. So I think it's just opened up a whole other challenge for the referees to now have to deal with in that kidology side of it as well, because any arm left in there or any leg left in there that you bump into, you're going to get a penalty or a 6 again on the back of it. So there's that element of gamesmanship that could artificially have been brought into it as a consequence of the new rule change. But again, I think I was reading last week or this week or listening to a podcast whereby a lot of time, if you watch Penrith, apparently they don't mind giving away a 6 again on the first tackle, because it allows them a full reset of the line, and especially if it's in the opposition half, it means they've got a full organised line to deal with the 6 tackles rather than a chaotic start to a set. So again, I'm not promoting that as a tactic, but that's how clubs and teams are adapting to this rule to try and help with the defensive situations that they're finding themselves in.
Yeah, and look, and there's always ways to exploit things as well, isn't there? People are clever enough to work out how they can use things to their benefit, whether it's using the making a 7 tackle set, whether it's holding on to the players. I saw Jez Litton accused of running into defenders who are not rolling away to deliberately get a penalty, and I'm not saying he is. The defender's got a responsibility to get out of the way. But look, there's lots of ways of exploiting the situation, isn't there? What we're going to have to do, though, Graham, on Friday night, much better than what we did against Catalan and in some of the previous games, is control that ruck, because St Helens are currently leading Super League in terms of dummy runs and also tackle busts. So there's no doubt that they've been playing at a fast tempo, and that is something we are really going to have to arrest on Friday night, because as much as we've benefited from the quick rucks as well, look at some of the tries we've scored this season, in broken field. Absolutely brilliant. For me, that won't win us the game on Friday night. It'll be controlling that defensive effort around the ruck and slowing St Helens down, and almost going back to like we was last season, like you said already, Graham, controlling that ruck, pinning teams back, slowing that game down, so it's a game that we want to play and we're not playing somebody else's. Yeah,
I think we saw elements of it on Saturday, John, against Catalans, whereby we got a full set of 6 in their 20, 30 metre zone from a defensive perspective. They couldn't get out. They had to put a deep kick in. So we've shown it can be done, but I don't think consistently we've been able to do that, to exert that 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute block of pressure that we've sort of seen quite often last year of us being able to do within a half. So I agree. Looking at Saints and the stats, they don't lie after 5 rounds for them. So we've got to be mindful of that. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist there. We've sort of worked out their game plan between you and I as 2 average fans here. But we've got to be aware of that on Friday night. We've got to try and counter that the best way we can. And being able to control that ruck is much more difficult now than it was last season. So how do we do that legitimately? How can we then exert our attacking strengths on them and make them have to think about us? Because we've got equally as good runners with the ball in Jez Litton, Mikey Lewis, etc. How can we get on top defensively so that our key playmakers can have ball in hand and cause them trouble and tire their middles out and cause them issues? So, yeah, I think it's going to be a real intriguing encounter on Friday night. I think it'll be a really tough game in terms of the opposition, and if we come away with a good performance and 2 points on that, we'll definitely have to earn it.
Yeah, no doubt. One player that I'm enjoying at the moment, and particularly what I'm enjoying about him, is his short kicking game. That's Tyrone May. He's 15, 10 metres out from the defensive line. He's coming up some magic plays at the moment, so I'm really enjoying him. We saw Tom Whitehead retain his place in the side. We know, of course, that Reece Martin will be missing, as will Artur Morg. Are you expecting any changes in the lineup? Of course, as we record this, we don't know the squad. We're waiting for Willie Peters' press conference, where normally they reveal if there's any injuries or not. But based on the fact there might not be any injuries, you expect any change in the lineup?
I can't see too much change there, Jono. If I'm completely honest, to what was out on Saturday. Nod to Tom there. I think he put in a tremendous defensive effort as a back row on Saturday, which again most of the time will go unnoticed. He was high up on the tackle count chart midway, partway through that game. So I don't expect too much in the way of personnel. What I do expect a difference in though is removing some of those basic errors that we coughed up. Simple passes going astray, drop balls, etc. We can't afford to give a team like Saints easy possession in key areas of the field. So I think we need to tidy that up. I think if we can smarten that up and reduce those errors, reduce those 6 agains that we give away. Like you said a few minutes ago, John, we aren't that far away. I think if we can tidy those areas up and improve a little bit of attacking, I think we've got enough to beat Saints on Friday night.
Yeah, I mean, going back to that Catalan game, 52 missed tackles.
Yeah.
It's big numbers out there compared to Catalans' 30 missed tackles. Errors, 14 errors compared to Catalans' 5. Yeah. Albeit Rovers with a 90% completion rate as well. And that's where stats sometimes don't always, any team that comes away with a 90% completion rate, you're expecting pretty much 9 times out of 10 to come away with a victory, aren't we? So, I think it's clear to see where the side needs to smarten up. I think Willie Peters has put his trust in these boys since the Leeds game. He gave them an opportunity to redeem themselves. I've got no doubt whatsoever that he's probably going to go with the same lineup, barring any injuries that may have occurred. Because when you look at the options we've got who want in the squad, there's not that many who are going to come in and be game changers, I don't think. So I think it's an opportunity for the players on Friday night to right some of them wrongs and hopefully come away with them 2 points on what is hopefully going to be a very special night as the world champions return home. At the start of the week, I posed a big question, and it was on the back of the Catalan defeat. And the question was, Graham, with the Robins losing 3 league games so far this season, is the League Leaders Shield defence already over? I'll give you a flavour of some of the comments that people put. Roger Wilkinson, the Vegas distraction proved to be a big distraction. Right recruitment, changing backroom staff and setting of the coach, complacency, other clubs lifting the game. There's some of the reasons that Roger's putting down to why we may have tasted defeat so many times so far this season. James McCracken, he says, can't go from a great team to a poor one over the off-season. Why do you think they're so passive in defence compared to last season? I think we've covered that, Graham, haven't we, about some of the changes and why the Robins might be a little bit slow in defence at the moment. Paul Ford, Sean Michael, he says, realistically, it's already gone. We had a golden opportunity to build on last year's success and didn't strengthen the squad nearly enough, despite being under the cap and having room to recruit. That's difficult to understand. Even more concerning, the game plan still hasn't adapted to the fast rucks, which are clearly dictating matches this season. Tom Noble says, yes, another loss or 2 in the next 4 or 5 games, and top 6 begins to look doubtful. Steve Sutton, I reckon so. I might change my mind if he's to go as well, but I'm not seeing a good team at the moment, just a set of good individuals. Julie Rodman, it isn't, but I think they've made it very difficult for themselves. So realistically, to win the League Leaders Shield, you can only lose 5 in a season. Looking at the last few seasons, so we've only got 2, we can lose right the way until the end of the season. Adam Wadworth, he says, I'd say so. Top 4 is probably the main aim. League-wise now, I expect to drop off from last season. We had built the last few years, and nothing can top what we achieved last season, which was an overachievement. So as long as we are competitive and competing for honours, we as a fan base can accept that. James Perlin says, it's more difficult, especially with a negative points difference and the massive points difference Wigan and Warrington have. Next couple of league games at home are must wins if we want to retain it. I'm just concerned about our current defensive fragility. Defence has regressed in what it was like pre-Peters, and that needs to sharpen quickly. And Michael Matthews, we'll finish with him. Probably yes. However, I can see most teams dropping points, including Wigan. Our starting fixtures were horrendous, and it shows in the results. Most travellers out the way, barring Toulouse. So hopefully we can start winning, especially now we actually have a good home game. In hindsight, was Vegas a good idea? Raising our profile, yes. In terms of the season, probably not. What do you think, Graham?
Yeah, so I think there's some fair comments in that bundle there, Jono. Some I agree with, some probably challenge. I think the point made around the 5 league games available to lose, and you're still in the mix with that. Well, we're right behind the 8 ball on that. We only lost 5 last year, I think, and won the League Leaders Shield by a squeak. So yeah, we haven't got much room for manoeuvre there. So if you think we've got 23 games left and we can only afford to lose 2 of those realistically, we've still got Wigan to play twice, Saints to play twice, Warrington to play twice, etc., etc. I don't think we can go through that amount of games and a cup run as well, and lose only 2 games. I'd love to be proven wrong on that, but I don't think that is realistic. So I'd probably have to say yes. However, that I think is too far to be thinking ahead. We need to be thinking week on week and what's the here and now, and building week by week on performances and results against Saints this week, and then Hull FC the week after. So those are the immediate short-term goals, is to get good performances, good results out of those, and the rest will have to take care of itself in the coming months. But was the start to the season horrendous? York, ordinarily it would have been York, Warrington,
then
Leeds, Huddersfield.
Yeah.
That was horrendous as a start to the season. I think that's quite a steady start in terms of the calibre of opposition that we've had to face over the first 4 or 5 weeks.
And also, Graham, you've got to look at, actually, there ain't that many easy games at the moment. You look at the newly promoted sides who have come in, and York have backed up that victory against Rovers with some impressive performances against other sides, haven't they? Yeah. So there is no easy game. I suppose a lot of supporters will look at maybe the travelling and just
I accept that, Jono.
The shifting in focus, going from a Challenge Cup game against Loch Lane to league game to World Cup Challenge to going to, and it's just them little head shifts where you're not setting out on the League Leaders Shield campaign. Almost, you're setting out on 3 different fronts, which is difficult to deal with.
Yeah, and you've also got that added distraction. Certainly, the York game was the start to the season, so you've got all the pressure around building up to the start of the season as defending champs, treble, World Cup challenge around the corner. You've then got the World Cup challenge itself and the uniqueness of that particular week in terms of media scrutiny and all of that, and then the emotional side of it, finishing that, and then straight on the plane out to Vegas for, again, all the media that went with that and the hype surrounding that. None of those first 3 weeks were normal in terms of the routine week-to-week Super League action. That was what I was hoping once we'd got back into the Challenge Cup and the game against Huddersfield and then Catalans, that we'd get back into that routine. And whilst it was decent against Huddersfield, a poor Huddersfield team as well, that was why Catalans was a bit of a benchmark for me of where we were at. And yes, Catalans have improved, but again, it's something as a bread and butter routine result we would have, I think, picked off last year, but it just shows we're in a different position this year. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of circumstance around travel and the emotional side of it, and that the media attention that the first month of the season has brought. But look, let's get settled down to back to business. Where's our bread and butter? Well, it's the league this week. It's 2 points for the next few weeks, and then we've got a quarter final of the cup to consider. So we're still alive and kicking on a couple of fronts there. The aim will be, no doubt, to get that top 4 position. No doubt, come end of the season. And I still think we're capable of doing that, given we've got lots of improvement to have in us. We need to start seeing that improvement week on week to generate those results, and ultimately 2 points on the league ladder and get up there and be competitive, and people start to worry about our performances again, rather than seeing us as a team that's been there and done it but actually can't back it up this season.
Yeah, and I wonder whether deliberately or subconsciously the players, the coaches will almost partition off this first little bit of the season now and almost look at this home game against St Helens and then the run of, 3 home games, I think, as almost starting the season now, and this is where the season starts. And before we go to...
Sorry, John. I was just going to say, I think I agree there. We've heard Peters talk about blocks of games and milestones within the season to work through, because the season is such a long season anyway. You have to work in those blocks and set yourself mini targets. So I think now that this is all out the way with, that there might be a little reset of mindset and target setting for the next block of games. We've got three in a row at home. Then I think we've got Toulouse away, Bradford away, something like that, off the top of my head. So you look at that on paper, and ordinarily you'd say, look, there's opportunity for 5 wins out of 5 there. But let's not get carried away and think that's going to be easy, because we've just talked about Bradford's performances. Toulouse are no mugs at home. Saints are doing well. Black and White's had a good result on Sunday as well against Leeds. So yeah, we've got to be on it ourselves to earn the right to get the 2 points or victories in Challenge Cup coming up.
Right, we're going to go to question time, but before we do then, I just want to bring your attention to a little bit of a bittersweet message that I received from Dino Longley. He was watching on YouTube. He says, and this is on the back of the last Robin pod that I did with Bazza Kingston. He says, get in there, lads, another excellent episode. Really cheered me up today, as yesterday evening my partner of 18 years passed away in Dove House after a treacherous battle with cancer. She never went to the ground like me, but always followed the Robins from the TV set. Just wondered if you could join me, lads, in saying R.I.P. Fiona. Gone, but never, ever forgotten. Dino, thanks for that lovely message. Obviously, I'm sure I speak on behalf of everybody watching and listening when we send out condolences. Yeah, hopefully you can find some joy in the Robin pod at what must be a very difficult time for you. Right, question time. Bazza Kingston, I've always backed our boys, Graham, no matter what, but I personally believe we need some small changes at our club. Do you think we need some changes? If so, where? Training, coaching setup? Not really Peters. Players, we've set the bar high and feel we're not living up to our potential. We saw glimpses of what we're capable of when we beat Brisbane, but we also saw fragility. Probably echoing some of the things that we've spoke about, Graham, but I think we've discussed some of the mitigating circumstances to why we maybe are where we are. That said, we have to draw a line in the sand. We said about just then, didn't we? We said blocking out these games. Obviously, more questions will be posed if we don't beat St Helens. If we go, struggle against some sides going forward, questions will be raised. But hopefully come 10 o'clock Friday night, we're talking about a victory and the season really kicking on.
Yeah, and again, I think it's an easy thing to do when things aren't going your way, is to look at what's going wrong. And sometimes it might just be those tiny things that we as fans never get to see. It could be something that's changed. It could be, the new ideas of the coaching team that have come in. We've had a shift in backroom staff. Is it taking a while for Watson and Gale to get their thoughts and opinions implemented? Is that part of it? Is it attitude? Is it I won't say it's desire, but has something fundamentally shifted mentally in our mindsets around what happened last year compared to this year? Have we fully flushed that out the system and gone back to a zero reset position, or are we still riding on the back of that piece of history, albeit recent history? We don't know. I guess the one thing that we know of Willie Peters and his team are they're meticulous. So I don't think there'll be any stone that they're leaving unturned in terms of looking at, are we doing things right? Have we got the prep right? Is our mental preparation right? Is our physical preparation right? Is our match day preparation right? All those things will be being looked at, regardless win, lose or draw. I think Willie's the sort of coach that we hear from, whereby he's always looking for those improvements, whether it's from an individual player, whether it's from the collective unit, whether it's whether it's groups of players. I think we can be assured that they will be looking at all of that. But the important thing is to remember, I think we mentioned it earlier on, we're not going to be a bad team overnight. I think we just need to make a few adjustments in mindset, in attitude, in adjusting to rules and regs, etc. And I don't think we'll be far away.
Yeah, and we have brought a new coaching team in, a new coaching structure. That takes time to adapt. That takes time to be implemented. That takes time for their ideas to be transversed onto the field. And I think the other thing as well is, Bazza, is that we've said on the Robin Pod previously, I think particularly this season, there is going to be bumps in the road. And it's when there's them bumps, that's when we as supporters probably need to keep our cool and just keep trusting in the faith and trusting in the boys and trusting in the processes. Don't get me wrong, if we're having this conversation with a third of the season to go, then there's going to be questions raised, isn't there, and questions to answer. But just where we are now, I think this is probably a time where we just need to just keep the patience, keep our patience, keep the faith, keep backing the boys, and it will come good. Ben Harrison, he says on Facebook, he says, not going to lie, we're pretty much where I expect us to be after Las Vegas and the World Cup Challenge. My only concern is that St Helens are really going to test us after that derby aside, because anything can happen there. We've got a run of what people called easier games. If we can build some momentum through that stretch, do you think Wigan Warriors will be the real benchmark for how our season shapes up? I mean, there's a lot of water under the bridge to go into before we get to that point, and I think it's probably going back to that Willie Peters tried and trusted method of just the next game's the most important, and hopefully that'll get us to where we need to be come that Wigan game.
Yeah, 100% focus has got to be Saints on Friday night, and then it'll shift once that review is done. It'll shift forward to Good Friday and the derby. So I think, you know, as fans, we obviously want the best for the team, and we want them to be doing well and performing at that level we saw last season. And I think that the previous comment there, Jono, is quite right in that we talked about it pre-season. I think before the Lochburn game, of there will be bumps in the road to deal with, and it's how we deal with them and how do we deal with the adversity. And as fans, have we been suckered into to believing all the hype that we created last season and carrying it forward to this season? Are we still riding on that from a performance perspective and expecting that every single week? I think there's a whole host of other factors that we now need to consider as fans that are a completely different position to where we were 12 months ago. So yeah, that realistic expectation from the previous comment, I think, is a fair one. Of we expected a little bit of a hangover. But as we said a few minutes ago, that the challenge for us now is to draw those lines in the sand, to move forward. And again, those perceived easier games, you know, Bradford, Toulouse, I don't think they'll be easy games. I think they'll be challenging games. We've seen they've pulled some good results out between them in the first 5 rounds. I think it's a solid block of games that if we're going into it with a mentality of, oh, these are easier games, we'll prepare a little bit less. I think we could come unstuck.
Yeah, right. We're going to rattle through these questions, Graham. David Johnson, he says, and it's basically, do you think Willie and players being touted for the NRL every other day is unsettling the squad? Willie Peters mentioned again yesterday for the PNG job. Is it just outside noise and they're probably cracking on? I don't know.
I would hope so. Yeah, I would hope so. You're never going to be able to stop that, so you can't block it out because it's going to be there. You just have to learn to deal with it. Willie Peters has consistently said he's focused on the job at hand here, and I can't imagine, having seen his performances over the last 3 to 4 years with us, I can't imagine that he's taken his eye off the ball for a second and letting this affect the work he does with us here. What will be, in terms of future, but he's openly said he's fully committed to the cause here and fully focused on the job at hand, and that's Saints on Friday night.
Yeah, Nick Sims says, has the club's infamous brutal preceding Tenerife had an adverse effect on the squad this time? Bearing in mind the opening schedule we had, the forward pack looks spent and 2 or 3 backs are nowhere near the players who were last term. The energy in defence is particularly worrying at this stage. I'll answer that, Graham. I think there's no doubt that, like we've said, some of the new rule around the ruck and all stuff like that is having an impact on the players. I think that they've had a testing time in terms of what we've just been talking about in terms of travel. You know, Batchelor being rested early on in the season against Huddersfield. You know, we probably didn't expect that to happen. We're seeing Elliot Minchella spelled more during games now. So we're seeing a bit of a greater rotation of forwards. I think they're as fit as probably they've ever been, but I think they're having to deal with circumstances which are different to what we've become accustomed to. Time will tell what over the next few weeks about fitness. What I will say is we have got a fit squad. You know, there's not many clubs at the moment putting out, the 1 to 13 or 2 to 13 and going through them early squad numbers when the squads are announced. So, yeah, time will tell. And I understand. Go on.
Yeah, just on that, John, I think the work that's done in pre-season is what sets you up for the season. So you get all your fitness in pre-season. What you do during the regular season is just maintaining that. You don't necessarily go hard in the physical training, so you're just looking to maintain what you've already got. So I agree that there needs to be a hard pre-season. It paid dividends for us last year, and I'm sure it was just as equally as hard this season. So there's no doubt that there will be a fit bunch of lads. But I do agree as well with the comment that sometimes they do look tired. But is that the in-game management that we need to be better at, of rotation of players, which you've acknowledged there as well, John? Or is it the speed of the game that's different, that's catching them out? But again, all ifs, buts and maybes and semantics that we may or may not get to the bottom of. We could spend all afternoon talking about it, but never come up with a solution for it.
Yeah, Regan Andrews, he asked similar questions about the fitness of the players. And he says, if he was Willie Peters, would he change anything? If I was Willie Peters, I'd go with the same group of players that played against Catalan and see how they respond to the challenge against St Helens, and then go after that. And then we've finish.
We've said it dozens of times, John, that we trust Willie Peters and his coaching staff in terms of they're the ones closest to make these calls and understand where the players are at. They're monitoring them all the time about loads and fitness levels, etc. So whatever decisions they make, we should respect that, because they've got all the information to hand to make those decisions. We haven't. Yeah,
Matty Lane asked, is it time to rotate some players? If we had another fullback, for example, I would have said put Jack Broadbent at centre. One player who's struggling a little bit is Peter Hickey, I think, in particularly in defence. But that's not necessarily down to him. That's about how, we mentioned about players being pulled out of position. And
man of the match week before.
So, he's someone I think still lends. He's got credit in the bank for me. Obviously, we are hamstrung by the fact that we've got Artem Org out injured and Declan Murphy. So that fullback is pretty much Jack Broadbent at the moment, isn't it? Because there isn't really anyone else who you could make a case for playing there. And we'll finish with this question, Graham. You can answer this. Are we at the point where Willie Peters needs to reassess things? We're still under the cap and have overseas capacity available. So do we refresh the squad? Or did we refresh the squad enough in the off-season to maintain standards and keep progressing? Also, with the rule changes speeding, the ruck, should we be adapting the game plan move more by now? Feels like it might be time to recalibrate slightly, but in the meantime, let's get behind whoever pulls on the shirt, because this team has earned that support and we will bounce back for the love, not the glory.
100%. 100% the last point. The bits about tweaking things, I'm sure the coaching staff are considering all options. Would bringing new players in help or hinder? We'll never know, but the club, I'm sure, will be always on the lookout for opportunities to enhance the squad. The shake-up over the summer was minimal in terms of a couple of players out, a couple of players in to replace those. I don't think there's need for major panic for any fans in terms of the squad aren't good enough. I think they are. I think we've talked through enough this last hour, John, of some of the improvement areas that need to be made. But we're talking as fans here. The coaching staff and Willie Peters will be all over this and know where improvements are required much better than us. Yeah, no doubt. And sometimes it's not necessarily replacing the player; it's maybe changing some of the things the player does, which makes a difference. And I think that's where we put our faith in Willie Peters, Ian Watson, Luke Gale to pick 100%. Out some of them maybe little 1%ers, them little things a little bit different, and then see where that goes. Right, huge thanks, Graham, for joining us on the Robin Pod, which is of course powered by Budget Size Auto Centre, the only car specialist trusted by the players, club officials and supporters of Hull Kingston Rovers, the world champions. The world champions are back at home on Friday night. If you go into the game, make sure you're loud and proud. And for now, live, love, laugh and be happy.
Game. The Red Army's passion is always the same.
45 years of hurt in the Challenge Cup! 40 years of hurt as a team! Hull KR have won the Challenge Cup in 2025!